In the article Revitalizing the Debate Between Life and Choice, the 2004 March for Women's Lives by Sarah Hayden discusses the many issues that we're faced in today's society when it comes to pro-life and pro-choice. This article also discusses the many court cases that has brought about the debate between life and choice, as well as the marches and what is constitutionally right with pro-life and pro-choice. So let's talk pro-choice. Pro-choice can be considered as with a woman becomes pregnant, she has the choice of whether or not she wants to terminate her pregnancy. Many pro-choice advocates define situations of reasons why women may want to terminate their pregnancy could be due to rape, the health of her and the fetus are at danger, contraception has failed her, the baby may have a congenital disorder or may have a defect, incest, financial constraints, or they feel that the woman may be unable to raise the child. She may not be in the best situation to raise a child. As you know, some time ago, many 16-year-olds who did become pregnant, they either made the choice to terminate the pregnancy or they kept the baby, because at that young of an age, how many kids are able to be in a situation to where they are financially able to raise a child? Abortion right advocates, they also argue whether or not a pregnant woman continues with the pregnancy should be her personal choice, as it involves her body, personal health, and her future. Hayden goes on to discuss in the article that a lot of reason why abortion laws were in effect, or that abortionist advocates felt that abortion laws were in effect, was because they discriminated against poor women. Hayden also continues to say that the fight for pro-choice as well as equality started in the mid-late 1960s, where especially feminists started to join on to the advocacy of pro-choice. Hayden also discussed that there were various feminist groups arguing that pro-choice or pro-life, there was a limit to a woman's reproductive control, and to deny them of that, it will also deny them of their full citizenship rights. And I must say, I do agree with that, because how can someone else that who does not even know me tell me what I can do with my body? As a woman, I would not want anyone to tell me what I can do with my body or what choices I should make. And it's not constitutionally right that someone else should tell me what I should do with my body, and they don't even know my situation or my circumstance. The battle with the pro-choice movement in the mid 1960s only started the uphill battle for women and abortion rights. Now let's talk about pro-life. Many people who are pro-life define it as human life begins at conception, and that the human zygote is a person and therefore it has a right to live. They also describe this as fetus is a life, as well as if a woman gets an abortion, it is considered murder. Hayden goes on to talk about how many pro-life activists uses imagery as a way to describe the difference between pro-life and pro-choice. The imagery that Hayden describes in the article is how many people would use the visual of a fetus as, or sometimes a baby, if that may be it, as a way to describe that if a woman murders a child, they would show that this is what it would look like. A lot of that imagery is reflected sometimes it could be reflected in certain clinics or certain hospitals or out in the public in different areas. Hayden goes on to talk about one of the main imageries that was used back in 1965, and it became one of the most common ones that was used for pro-life advocates, was a fetus which was typically between 18 to 22 weeks old, and the caption was referring to as a fetus as an unborn child or baby. And it was accompanied by information about the physical status of the fetus, noting that, for example, that it can feel pain. Hayden also described that the image that was used They use it to frame and magnify the fetus to appear as it to be a complete and separate individual, and everything that surrounds the fetus is expunged, and the humanity and personhood is erased. Hayden also goes on to describe another set of images, which is some of the most common images that I know I have seen around from abortion opponents, is the images of babies or unborn children that were products of late-term abortion. Many of the abortion opponents ask people to look at these images and take into account that this is what all abortions looks like. And that is not necessarily the case, because now you have people, or now you have abortion situations to where they don't have to be terminated with late pregnancies, because they can be terminated by the pill instead of by what they used to terminate them with, which is so-called vacuum. Hayden mainly discusses how the imagery for pro-life activists are so important because it really captures what they're trying to say and the message that they're trying to deliver against the pro-choice activists. And I can actually say that some of those images are gruesome, but they also get the point across of what they're trying to convey to their viewers and to the people who they want to say, hey, look, this isn't right. This is wrong. This is what it looks like. And you should see, like, that is what an unborn child, like, this child could have a life, but this is what you're doing to the child. You're murdering them. And sometimes that can't be the case because, again, a fetus is not necessarily, or an embryo is not necessarily a human because it hasn't really developed. And that is what pro-choice advocates are saying. Like, even though some people are terminating their pregnancy early, they're not really terminating a human because the human hasn't developed yet. One of the main cases that Hayden discusses in this article is the Roe versus Wade. As we know, Roe versus Wade was one of the most profound cases for women and abortion activists. In reading this article and learning about Jan Roe and her background, basically Jan Roe got pregnant and married at the age of 16, and she left her husband because he was abusive to her. So her mother ended up getting custody of Jan because of all the situations that she was going through after she left her husband. So she ended up giving Jan up for adoption. Then she met someone else and she got pregnant by them. She was pregnant a second time. The second time she gave the baby up for adoption. But then she gets pregnant a third time, which is the most significant one that relates to this case. Jan gets pregnant a third time, and she goes to Texas to try and lie and say she was raped, because at the time Texas was one of the states where you can have an abortion as long as you said you were raped. Well, Jan didn't have a police report of her being raped, so because of the police report, by the time that all of the entire case could have got handled, she had already had the baby and she had given it up for adoption as well. But Jan tried to go to Texas and, of course, get an abortion. They found out that it was a lie. They wouldn't give her the abortion because it was illegal to abort a baby and a woman if they were not raped, which brought the court case for Jan versus Roe, where a woman has a right to abort a pregnancy if she feels that she's not able to take care of the child. The reason why the Roe versus Wade case is so significant is because of the court ruling and by them saying that it is protected under the 14th Amendment and the privacy for a woman, and it extends the woman's decision to have an abortion, but that right must be balanced against the state's interest in regulating abortion, which protects women's health and protecting the potential of human life. With Roe versus Wade, it opened the door for abortions, but it did not open the door for everyone, which is very significant. And Hayden also discusses this in the article, how although this case may have opened the door for women, it necessarily opened it up for white women instead of women of color and women that were poor. Women felt that, as Hayden discusses in the article, that it was the right to access abortion services and it was granted for everyone and everywhere. But the problem was the Roe versus Wade case, it was basically initiated for class and race base, which was one of the issues that initiated the Women's March. Hayden states in the article that because the ability to find and finance abortion services was not a problem for middle class white feminists, it appeared to them that the battle for abortion rights had been won. This was not the case for poor women, many of women who were of color. The challenges faced by poor women seeking abortion services became even more acute in 1977 when Congress passed the Hyde Amendment prohibiting federal funding of abortions. As we know, even today, federal funding for abortion clinics has been one of the main issues. And of course, this became an issue in 1977, which brought on along the March for Women's Rights because everyone wasn't included under the umbrella of saying, hey, you can have an abortion, you can have an abortion, you can have an abortion. No, it wasn't available to everyone because of the financial constraints that were limited to people who were unable to afford them. Which leads us into the reason why the Women's March happens. The March for Women happened in 2004 and it attracted well over 1 million people. The reason why this number was so significant is because that in previous women's marches, they were excluded to women of color. And it made it really important for women of color to be a part of this movement simply because of the issues that were demonstrated after the Roe versus Wade ruling, as well as moving forward with women having being available to abortions. And Hayden goes on to discuss how with women of color not being excluded, it caused an outcry and a storm of criticism to the women who were, to the middle class feminists and those women who were creating this march. And because of that criticism that they were receiving, they invited women of color in, which had a significant, profound effect on the march and the reason why the march was so big as it was. Hayden also goes on to discuss how, with women of color joining the march, it had a profound effect on the march's title as well. Many feminists wanted to have the march for freedom choice, but women of colors persuaded their colleagues that the title should be called the March for Women's Lives because it includes everyone. As people like to say, all lives matter. All women's lives matter, and that is what the women of color were trying to portray in this instance, because just excluding them, it doesn't make it available or make it seem like this march is for every woman. It makes it seem like it's for every white woman instead of every woman, every black woman, every Hispanic, every white woman, any woman. And so that is where the profound effect for the women of color coming in and helping transform what the march should really be about also made it such a great effect. Hayden goes on to tell us that another reason why this march was so profound is because that although there was no federal money there to fund abortion services, 87% of counties in the United States did not have an abortion provider. We all know that federal funding only funds abortions unless the woman is raped. So there was a legal right to abortion still remains empty due to the fact that there were lack of financial resources and geographic proximity to actually realize this whole right. Also, Hayden discusses that 44 million Americans did not have health insurance, and so treatment options offered to women due to race, income, and age were very sparingly. Hayden talks about the effects that the march had on individuals that participated in the march. She said that many people that were participating in the march did in particular identify themselves as advocates for the cause, but they were more specific about advocates for themselves and their identities. Hayden also discusses how we saw groups there announcing their professions, one including Physician for Reproductive Choice and Health or Medical Students for Choice. The other people that marched was on their political affiliations and beliefs, including Democrats for Choice, Republicans for Choice, and Anarchists for Choice. Hayden discusses how the most profound theme of the march was about family. And you would see young couples, including teenage daughters and fathers, holding hand and walking in groups together. Families identified themselves with signs of clothing, or parents would have a mother for by choice or a father for by choice. Or you see a t-shirt by a woman saying, I'm a choice. At the march, you will also hear from different speakers. Marchers were told about a story of a woman named Rosie, and she had died after the Hyde Amendment had been put in place. She was a migrant worker, and she was a mother of a 5-year-old daughter who was also a college student and was trying to create a better life for herself and her family. Because she was unable to receive help from publicly funded institutions, she chose to have an illegal abortion rather than spend her tuition money on a more expensive but safe procedure. The woman ended up dying due to this situation. Another story that was told was a man by the name of Bill who addressed the crowd on behalf of his daughter Becky, who had died as a result of an illegal abortion. Because many women have experienced and suffered illegal abortions that have died, it was very important for the marchers to know, like, although women want to make a better life for themselves, having an abortion or having the right to choose is important to them, because let's just say if Rosie was able to receive medical funding to have an abortion, although she did have a 5-year-old daughter, if she was able to do that, then maybe she would still be alive today if she didn't have to get the illegal abortion when she came pregnant a second time. All those situations are reasons why pro-choice is valid for women and women's rights. The reason why Hayden's article connects with what's going on in today's society is because we're living in a situation where we have our current president who is trying to defund Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood offers many different services for women who are pregnant, and they also provide abortions for women who want to terminate their pregnancy. Donald Trump has been on the record stating that if Planned Parenthood get rid of providing services for abortions, then he will not defund them. Technically, that's unethical, and it goes against everything that the Roe versus Wade ruling was. Services and clinics like Planned Parenthood are so important to our society because we do still have situations where we have teenagers and women who may become pregnant and they may not have the funds to really be able to get the services needed. Now, because things have been more advanced, you have, instead of just providing the illegal services or the former services such as the vacuum that people used to do, now you have abortion pills that people can easily take, and it will not harm them if they wait too late to try to terminate the pregnancy in the third trimester. Trying to defund organizations like that really brings on more issues for women who want to terminate their pregnancy. Let's say they have financial situations and they already have 1 or 2 kids and they can't afford to bring a third one on. You mean to tell me that they have to be stuck with a child, although it sounds more horrible than it may seem, they have to be stuck in a situation to where they can't afford it. Then that's when you run into the problem with welfare and people getting on welfare. You still have abundance of problems creating when you defund organizations that are meant to help and be there for women in those situations. Again, we're back in a political situation where it seems like every time election season comes around, abortion rights and pro-life advocates have been the focus for the election seasons. Definitely with a lot of Republican candidates, they are pro-life, especially the women Republicans who have tried to run for office. They put the main focus for pro-life as if a woman doesn't have a choice over her body. I'm sure that many women feel as though, why is someone trying to tell me what I need to do with my life or what I should do with my reproductive system? That's not fair to that woman. Again, you are removing their full citizenship rights at all. And for some reason, we are in a situation where political candidates feel as though that should be the main topic of discussion when we have other situations going across the United States, such as ISIS, such as immigration laws. We have abundance of other issues, but a lot of political candidates want to focus on what women should do, and this is what a woman needs to be, and where they should go, and what they should do with their body. And it's really unfair to women and unfair to me as a woman as well. I found Hayden's article to really be very informative, especially discussing from the beginning of pro-life and pro-choice and leading up to the Women's March in 2004, which included everyone, included feminists as well as women of color, as well as people who are from different nationalities. I chose this article because it represents a lot of what people are thinking nowadays, because it's become a big topic of why we don't understand why many political candidates are trying to force pro-life on people who are in the situation. Granted, some people put themselves in situations more times than not. Granted, we have situations where rape has been a case, or contraception is just not contraception is available to everyone, but the failure to use contraception has been enhanced by what's been seen on television, or contraception has failed them and they become pregnant. Unfortunately, we're in a situation where people are trying to tell women what they should do with their lives and what they should do with their bodies, and it's not fair. And I feel as though, as a woman, I should be one who should speak out against as why I have the right to choose what I want to do with my body. Me and my husband should have the right to choose what we should do with my body, not someone who I never met before in my life, not someone who represents my state, because at the end of the day, they say they may really be for us and representing our state and representing what should be right, when sometimes they're really not, as we've been seeing over the course of this election and this term with President Trump. Again, I appreciate Hayden's article about pro-life and pro-choice movements, because it really affects what is going on today, because we have to be cognitive of the leaders that we choose to put in office. We have to make sure that we're putting the leaders that are going to continue to make and vote to make the right decisions, especially for those who are pro-choice. If you're pro-choice, you have to make sure that you're voting for the right people, and you got to make sure that you're advocating for these individuals to be in office, because these are the people who are making the decisions for our everyday lives. And if we put the wrong people in the office, then we end up losing out on what's going to help us thrive in the United States.